Hello and welcome to another episode of Pitch Cafe podcast, a place where talent meets coffee. Our very first show of Pitch Cafe hosted, roasted, and boosted startup founders from the youth community. We are here to connect you with investors, founders who have a similar interest, and a whole bunch of resources to enable startup founders. Startup founders come in different sizes and shapes. They are from the music world, they are from the technology world. And today I'm very, very excited that we have two amazing, brilliant startup founders in the deep tech domain. Neuroscience is very close to my heart because I am a neuroscientist myself, and my thesis work was in spinal cord rehabilitation. We did cortical stimulation and chip implants to enable people who suffered paralytic stroke to regain their abilities to move. That was one of my favorite thesis topics, and I spent many years learning about this. And what a coincidence! I run into Vineet Johnson and Samir Sahoo, who have rolled out a startup in this domain. I could not hold my excitement, but the only thing I could do was get an intro and get them on this podcast. Deep tech is very hard, especially medical devices, with lots of FDA regulations and challenges in the clinical medical device space. These two founders are no stopping. They have given up their full time engagements and fully dedicated to this cause to help stroke patients. So let's find out what Vineet and Samir are up to in their startup, IRegained. All right. So here we are. So welcome, Vineet, and welcome, Samir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Vida. It's a pleasure
Pleasure.
being here. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So here I am based out of Silicon Valley. Every day I run into investors in the cloud, in the fintech, in the medical device domain. So Vineet, what do you have to say to me? How will you introduce yourself today on the podcast?
Well, I'm Vineet Johnson, founder and CEO of IRegained. My background is physical therapy and neuroscience. My interest in neuroscience and rehab started way back 30 years ago as an undergrad student working on my physical therapy degree back in Christian Medical College and Hospital in southern India. And the research back then that I was focused on was largely understanding how the hand function is controlled by the brain, predominantly in primate models or monkey models, so to speak. That interest and that enthusiasm carried on, stayed with me, and became my uh, uh, more of an obsession rather than academic interest over time, which eventually led us to understand much better how the hand function is controlled in the human system, and not only that, what happens when someone's brain is damaged, and how do you replace this function so that these individuals can reclaim their independence and live an independent life. In short, that's kind of how I would introduce myself.
Fantastic. I know you have a great pedigree. You studied in Purdue, so we'll go to that phase of your life. Hold that thought, and let's welcome on board Samir Sahu. Samir, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Vida. I really appreciate the opportunity. My name is Samir Sahoo, and I was born to be an engineer. I always loved fiddling around with things, breaking things, making things, building things. And as I grew up, I eventually ended up being a marine engineer and worked in the oil and gas ships in the oil and gas industry. And one of the good things I learned there is to be resourceful. So basically, in the middle of the Pacific or Atlantic, you have no 911. You basically have to make do with whatever you got. You have to use your thinking on the feet, resourcefulness, and problem-solving abilities to make sure that the ship is running as per schedule and all of that. It's a very complex operation. What I'm trying to say is, I learned a lot in that phase, and I was always passionate about doing something bigger or something for the greater good, like helping humanity in sort, like big, lofty, altruistic goals. But I didn't know how, so I did my master's of business at Purdue to do a career shift. And there I met a lot of bright medical students, a lot of good scientists who were working in the medical device and medical technology fields. I worked with them as a business student, helped build their business plans, spin out companies, raise money, and basically commercializing technologies out of Purdue Research Parks. And so I did that for some time, and then wanted to get some more real world experience in the marketing, sales, and business development side. So I did that with my job at Zimmer Biomet, which is one of the largest musculoskeletal companies in the world. I worked there as a product manager, as a marketing manager, as a business development person, managing a broad portfolio of products. But I always deep down wanted to come back to the innovation world and again build something new, something that is really needed out there in the world that can help people. So in my mind, the mantra that always keeps running is doing good profitably. Because I'm a business person, I understand how to run a company profitably, but it has to have a social impact, a greater good for the humanity. And when I met Vineet through my connection to Mars, which is one of the largest incubators in Canada, I found the perfect partner on the science side, which is what I wanted, like somebody who knew the science and I can apply the engineering, the business, and the commercialization aspects to do something good for people. And this is where we are.
Fantastic. So I think this such startups are called zebra startups. You have social impact as well as your profitability, and you are also building technology. So that's what you're building essentially. So you have a very strong team here. So Vineet, you come from McGill and Samir from Purdue, and you have both have deep expertise in this technology domain. So at what point did you decide to roll out a startup? What was that moment like when both of your minds met and you decided, hey, let's do something? What was that defining moment?
For me, largely, it started as a research interest, right? Where I was more interested in understanding how does the brain control your hand? Why does it control? Which eventually moved on to what happens when part of your brain is damaged and how do you reclaim that lost damage. But there came a point, it was kind of like a flashlight, uh, where I was working with robotics, and each of these devices would cost upwards of $150,000, $200,000. It didn't make sense because the average individual cannot afford that kind of a device. An average clinic cannot afford that kind of a device. And very few hospitals can afford such a device. So as a result, my goal was to, find a device that which is affordable, but most importantly, clinically effective. So people can take the device home and then use it in the comfort of their home. So if I asked you, did you know how to play tennis? And let's say you told me you don't know how to play tennis. And then I said, okay, let's train you to play tennis. We got to make you an amateur. You would be required to spend 20, 30, 40 hours a week to get to that amateur status. The same thing happens to a hand function in a stroke survivor. They really need to work on 20 to 40 hours a week. And the only solution is to provide an affordable solution in the comfort of their home. So at that point, I pivoted towards such a device. And the results we got were very, lack of a better word, fantastic. We could see making a profound impact on people's lives. And around that time, I had this conversation with a colleague of mine. And he basically said, if you really want to make a difference in the world, quit your job, get off the high chair, get your feet wet, and do something about it. It was kind of like a wake-up call. It was in 2016. And from there, it was kind of like no turning back. It was more like a calling after that. So we registered as a company. I took a year off, backpacked, kind of got my mind into sync, came back in 2017 and started working on the company. And by early 2018, I met with Mr. Joel Liederman. Joel Liederman is Samir's former boss who recruited Samir to the Mars Innovation. And by around end of 2018, uh, one day, two things happened. Joel asked me if I would be interested in talking to a fascinating guy called Samir Sahoo, who has a lot of business expertise. And on the same time, he called Samir and asked him a simple question. With that, I'm going to ask Samir to take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Vineet. Samir, your side of the story.
Yeah, basically, I was working with Mars Innovation, which is now known as Toronto Innovation Acceleration Partners. And I got that offer because of my experience with Zimmer Biomed in marketing, sales, business development. And Joel Liederman was the vice president of physical sciences. So he managed a portfolio of various companies, and medical technology or medical device portfolio was the biggest in physical sciences. And I was the commercialization manager there. And so when Joel basically retired from the organization in 2016, he still thought he actually retired, but he nevertheless, he is so passionate that he had a false retirement actually. He kept working on helping medical device companies, and one of those companies was Vineet's company. And he basically, out of the blue, and at that time, I was in India vacationing in December, and out of the blue he gives me a call and asks me a direct question, and he says, what do you know about stroke? And I get a little nervous. I'm thinking, like, did somebody get a stroke, like somebody in his family, like, is everything okay? And so I asked him, why do you ask? I know, but is everything okay? He said, no, there is a company in stroke rehab space, so I want to know, what do you know about stroke and what do you know about stroke rehab? So I get my foot a little bit and I said, okay, this is not a serious medical issue. So I basically give him some information about another company out of Mars that is in the same space. They do stimulation rehab on stroke patients. And so I say, yeah, I've worked with that company and I know this is what the challenges they're facing. This is how they're commercializing. And I think, there could be better options. And so we chat, and he said, take a look at this company. Tell me what you think. So I did my own independent research. It took me quite a long time to get convinced that this is, first of all, the right solution, and that there is indeed no good solution out there in the market. Because in my mind, I was thinking, well, stroke is big. Everybody knows about stroke. Everybody has somebody or the other in their family or extended family had a stroke. There is the Heart and Stroke Foundation that gives billions of dollars for research, grants, and so forth. And still, nobody has figured out an issue with the hand that happens in 70% of the cases. But turns out, after my research, I found out that's actually indeed true. And the fundamental challenge was, I found out most people are approaching it from a very technology or engineering perspective. Nothing wrong with that, but the fundamentals are not addressing the problem, which is from the neurological side. How do you apply the principles of neuroplasticity? And that is where iRegained was different. It is different, and everything they're doing is completely different. And so that convinced me, and I was saying, okay, this is what I can bring to the table. And if you think I'm a good fit, you can make your decision.
That's an amazing pitch. I've always believed that the subject matter expert should drive these deep technology initiatives. If you are, building a robot for neuroscience, or you're building a robot for neurorehabilitation, you need to have the driving force coming from the neuroscience expert. So it's
Yes.
certainly a very strong differentiator. Technology is enticing, but we are here to solve a problem, and the solution is fitted to the problem, not to the technology. So in Silicon Valley, technology is the hype. Any new technology, whether it's machine learning or quantum or whatever, people want to fund that. But then here you are, and you're talking about deep science, which matters. So let's move to the next section here. So Samir was the the commercialization partner here, but Vineet, What do you think are some of the challenges in commercialization? Why do you think you picked Samir as a fit for your startup?
Well, one of the things I've learned in life, whoever you work with, whoever you partner with, you need to find someone who has unbridled passion to work on the project. Number two is very comfortable in taking criticisms and not offended by it. And the third is teamwork. Uh, it was pretty interesting. The very first conversation, uh, Ranjit is the other co-founder who's not here today, met with Samir. We just clicked. We didn't have. It seemed almost like we would have been friends for ages, and we've been now working for a good 3 years, and the 3 years is a testament to that. We are very comfortable in criticizing each other, comfortable in picking up the lag. A startup, you're working morning till night, uh, and sometimes you lag behind or he lags behind, and it, it's not a question of will you do this for me. You just say I'm stuck on this. Could you take care? And it's done. You know,
Oh,
and most of all, character. Samir is just a phenomenal guy. He- I- if you want to start a company, you want someone like Samir to be there,
awesome.
not just from the engineering side, not just from the commercialization side, but also to be that cheerleader. Because most of the time, someone stands up as a CEO and then creates a hierarchical structure. We have a pretty flat organization here. Everybody picks up and starts from there. And having Samir there, he kind of drove that theory. For me, I always believed in it. And Samir drives that theory into that, weaves it into the fabric. So we've been collectively a great team in that sense. So, and the other side is, you could have all the science you want, but if you didn't have that technology
Right,
actually matching and giving it what it needs, you
right.
also need the person with the skill set to think. Yeah, it's easy to say, I'm going to go put it in a store and sell it. But what store? How do you sell it? How do you bring it up? How do you bring it to product? I mean, to market? How
Mm-hmm.
are you going to drive the various partners? Is it a hospital? Is it a clinic?
Yeah.
And Samir has been in that space, but besides being in that space, it's that unbridled passion. You cannot replace that. And I think that's what is the greatest thing about Samir.
Awesome. So I can see why Samir would want to work for Vineet. Everything Vineet said, he himself is an embodiment of that. I can certainly see that. So with that, there it is, a team spirit. I can certainly see that. So the team is checked. The problem is checked. Now let's look at the market. So Samir, how big is the market you're trying to address? And what are some of your go-to-market strategies? If the investor wants to invest in you and believe in you, how do you plan to mitigate the go to market risk?
Absolutely. Very good question. And, we have dealt with that from many investors. So first of all, let me address the market size part. So this technology, even though we are talking about stroke alone, it's it's a very platform technology. The science can be broadly applied to multiple other conditions. Just to name a few: traumatic brain injury, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, and others. But in the effort to be focused and laser focused in bringing one product to market, we talk about stroke. Now, let's say stroke is the only market. Within that, if you do the numbers, like every year 15 million people have a stroke, and 70% of them have some hand function paralysis. And 10 years, people from 10 years past strokes, because that's approximately the average lifespan post stroke, have still got the hand function disability with no solution. They're living with that disability. So if you do the math, it roughly comes to 100 million people globally with hand function disability who could benefit from this device. In terms of dollar figures, we could all argue different ways on pricing and other things, but ballpark speaking, the total aggregate market is at least 30 billion, and that is just in stroke alone. So if you have to add, traumatic brain injury and other, it's much larger. Then comes the war veterans and the war related injuries, which is even broader. So it's pretty big market and pretty huge market, and that is what we are addressing now. On the go to market side, so we basically developed a strategy of B2B to C. Why is the case? Is because you have to think who is going to use the device and how is this going to be used? What is the use case scenario? If you look at the stroke rehab pathway, post acute care, like after a patient's life is saved through intervention and they're stabilized in the hospital, they basically go through a continuum of care: outpatient care, then long term facility, then home rehab, and so forth, depending on their condition. So, our point of call would be these residential rehab facilities. So, it would be a long term care center or a clinic or an outpatient center, and we will be either selling or leasing or financing the device depending on their operating budgets and their capital expense budgets and so forth. We want to make sure that our device is adopted regardless of their financial abilities, and we have built models around that. On reimbursement side, we can get insurance reimbursement for the device, or we can get leasing and financing to make sure these residential rehab centers first adopt. Once they adopt and they see the benefit in their clients, which would be stroke patients, then the patients would themselves be actually asking, how can I use this device more? Instead of coming to the clinic twice a week or thrice a week, paying for taxi, paying for parking and all of that, and getting somebody else to help you, all of that, if they can just take the device home and use it on their own 20, 30, 40 hours, they will benefit a lot. So that would be the B2B to C, which would be basically paying a referral fee or some kind of channel partnership with these centers so that they can recommend and prescribe these devices for stroke patients. And because it's a telemedicine based system, it can be used remotely by the patient with remote telemedicine supervision by the physiotherapist or the occupational therapist or clinician.
Fantastic. Great answer, Samir. There are lots of other models, I think, for this. If you look at Teladoc, Livongo, of course, you're a hardware device, so hardware works differently. And is there like a software counterpart which can use a subscription model, which you can, is that what you're talking about as referral?
Yes. So
Oh,
our device is basically not a device, it's a platform. So we already have that software component. In fact, the brain of the machine, so to speak, is the clinical protocols, which are automated algorithms. Those are the software. And there is also a gamification side to it, which basically improves engagement in the patient. So they're really excited, in an interesting term, they're more addicted to use the device, which actually gives them more benefit. So both the protocol side, which is the software platform, as well as the gamification side, can be monetized using SaaS. So software as a service on a per user per month basis or on a monthly subscription basis. Either way, we've worked on different models depending on who the buyer is, whether it's a long-term care center or skilled nursing facility or individual patient. We have those SaaS models there, and that makes the revenues more sustainable and highly scalable, but it
yeah.
also basically makes the platform more usable across the spectrum by broad group of stroke patients. So that's already built in. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, hardware is a small component. The software, which is scalable, which people can subscribe to, which you use for as part of the referral as well, is one of their strong components. I know hardware is hard, especially in clinical space. The clinical adoption, you have to go through a lot of trials. So with that, I want to pose this question to Vineet. So, Vineet, what is it like bringing a hardware device to the market in an FDA regulated environment? As it is, hardware is challenging, whether it's, you're building a consumer device or a healthcare device. As it is hard. So now you're building like a complex, deep technology hardware device, and then you have the software component, which is scalable and SaaS like. So what is it like to, bring a hardware to the market in the clinical environment, FDA environment?
Great question, Vida. The fact that you have such a complex nature of the market space complicates a lot of factors. One of the key important factors we need to look at is our system is a class 1 device according to FDA, which basically means we don't have to go through those expensive clinical trials. Rather, you register with FDA. Having said that, we still will be doing those clinical trials. And the objective of these clinical trials are to make the claims that we will be making over time, and also from marketing purposes.
So what is a use case like? What does your device look? Is this something you can share on this podcast? Like, what is a use case? Like, where do I pin it? What happens when I turn it on?
So what you see right beside me on this side here, you see a monitor, and the device opens up. When it opens up, you've got 5 little slots for fingers, and each finger goes into each of those slots. Because stroke patients have spasticity, the hand kind of curls up in different directions. The device is made in such a way it could accommodate for anybody to accommodate to any situation. Number 2, the device comes to the patient, not the patient go to the device. In other words, the patient is the center of the device. The tablet then gives them step-by-step direction. It says, you need to do your finger movement from here to here, this much of force. And they could use the device to do exercises for the fingers, or they could use a game. So we have 16 different protocols, and these are what we call proprietary protocols. And each protocol is a separate function. For example, if you lift up a coffee mug, this is how your fingers hold a coffee mug.
Right.
But if I pick up a pen, the entire way you hold the pen changes. So we have 16 different functions where the hand goes into different configurations. So you're targeting specific functions as we get the patients recover over time.
Fantastic. So this is all mapped on some sort of a spectrum or some sort of a signal chart, and you're tracking it across time. So it is across time, a longitudinal data study as well, right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
So when you think of a patient using the device, they could be remotely monitored and supervised by the clinician. So they don't have to go to a hospital, technically speaking.
Right.
And with consultation with the clinician, the physical therapist, occupational therapist, they've created a pathway on what they're going to do. Then they could touch base with them once a month or once in 2 months through telemedicine, where the clinician can see the video of the individual, see the hand video, see the actual parameters of the data that's being processed. If the finger moves X amount of distance or X amount of force, all of those data is collected, and that can be seen as graphs in real time. Or they could record and see it later as well.
I'm just curious, did you think about the virtual reality environment for this? Like we have, people can learn tennis on using a virtual headset now. They go into a virtual world, or they have the TV screens where their movements are mapped on an avatar like that. Did you think about any virtual environments, or is it too far-fetched?
If you think of most of these virtual environments, they largely focus on large muscle groups like your shoulder and arms and legs and so on. But when you think of the hand, you've got like 20 plus joints, 30 plus muscles controlling one hand.
Right.
So it becomes very complex. But not to mention, when someone gets a stroke, they're also disabled, and they find it very uncomfortable to wear a goggles and play in that altered environment. But we certainly will be exploring that in future as we move forward to find some more effective ways of exploiting technology. If it benefits the patient, then we need to figure out a way to help them get better.
Right. So, my next question will be to Samir. And this is, just an extension of what Vineet was explaining right now. He talked about the comfort level of the patient, the usability aspect of it, and why you picked this particular way of building the device. Is there any sort of intelligence or augmentation your device is doing to the patient? Augmenting their reality or some sort of augmented reality. I know these terms are over extrapolated, but the basic meaning you can tell because you're really adding value to the patient here in improving the recovery time. So what do you think? Is it intelligence augmentation or augmenting reality of the patient?
It is definitely distorting reality in a
In
so basically, you're right. I mean, these terms are overused or I'd say abused, but I would keep it really simple and explaining what it does, and you can fit in the adjectives as you see fit. So basically, what the device is doing is it is catering to what the patient can do at this point in time. Let's say a patient comes, a clinician does an assessment based on their neurological conditions. They can only move their finger 2 millimeter. So the device understands this patient has currently the ability to move only 2 millimeter, and it uses that to amplify the range, the force, all these capabilities so that ultimately the patient can grasp something. That's our goal, that they can grasp something. How they do, in simple terms, is basically they put the brain into a problem solving mode by distorting reality in the sense the patient moves certain distance inside the device by putting their fingers inside finger cups, which is that mechatronic device, but they can't see their hands. They don't know what they're actually moving. The screen gives an altered reality of what they're actually doing inside the device.
right, right.
So, in simple words, the brain gets tricked. And as the brain gets tricked, it is trying to solve that problem. It is making mistakes and it is learning from these mistakes. Think of how you were riding a bicycle. You probably would have fell 10, 15 times. And after that, once you got the balance, you just went with it. Like
So
that. Swimming.
yeah,
All these
you're
examples, right?
simulation. This is simulation. You're creating a simulation, and you're extending the experience of the brain. You're
Yeah.
not limiting it to actual. So you're augmenting it. This is augmenting reality, augmenting learning experience. This is quite powerful. This
Yeah.
is quite powerful. So you're reinforcing the cortical plasticity using technology.
The fact that he says distorting is reality. As much as the augmentation is right, distorting is the most more appropriate word, because
Right.
as you know, neuroplasticity occurs by error corrections from the cerebellum.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
so
Yes.
we distort, forcing patients to make mistakes, and as they make mistakes, there's more error correction, thereby helping with greater neuroplasticity. That's
Yeah.
why
Mhm.
I think Samir chose the awesome terminology there.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps just imagining the kind of technology you've built and what possibilities it could have. However, that is like the big vision which is enthralling me. Let's talk about the MVP. Let's talk about what round of funding you're raising, and what kind of clinical partners you're looking for right now at this point in your startup.
So let me start with the fundraising. I think a very important question that you asked is probably a key factor for every startup. We're currently raising a $2 million US dollars round as part of our pre-series A.
Mm-hmm.
And the objective of this round is to bring the product to market, obtain enough clinical validation and clinical, uh, both through the hospital point of view, like in terms of published data, but also market traction. So you've sold enough number of devices. So you've got a depth of traction, which attracts a Series A investor, so to speak, for our Series A round.
Yeah.
At this point, we've raised about 20% in committed funds, about 20% in due diligence at this point. There's another 30% in soft circle commitments, and we are working very hard to close the round by the 31st of December 2021.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
going back to the clinical validation side, more specifically, uh, for a for a medical device to be adopted in the market space, you need more clinicians to look at it, get the feel for it, and understand what it does, and accept it into their clinic or hospital or working environment. And for that, there are two different pathways. Pathway one is the research pathway, which is important. We have quite a few collaborations in place right now. And the pathway two, a lot of clinicians will just want to try a device. They want to try the device on their patients, understand the feasibility, functionality, and so on. So those are two parameters that they're looking at as well. So if you know any investor who's interested in the medtech space, social impact space, IRegained is a perfect partner for them. Uh, Not only do they make it makes business sense, but it most importantly makes a social impact sense as well. So you've got an added benefit to that investment portfolio for those individuals.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vineet. So that's a great way to motivate the investors and also partners here who want to make a difference. With that, Samir, I have one a last question for you. In the interest of time, what is your product priced at? And for all the partners and investors, and is this portable? Can it be taken to tier two, tier three cities in India? To smaller towns, or is it just for the US market?
Think of it like the size of a small beer cooler. So you can carry it in one hand. That's about the size, and it can be carried, yes, anywhere you want in small towns, big towns, doesn't matter. It can be carried in car for physiotherapists in the trunk of a car. We've thought through that, by bringing in a lot of clinicians, patients, and all their opinions have gotten into this device, which is what you see on the background.
And
Uh,
it has a phone interface, or does it require a separate laptop or a computer screen?
is self-contained. So that tablet that you see is part of the device. You do not need anything extra to work
I,
with the device. It's all part of it. Uh,
that's
from a price standpoint, again, I would like to quote a number, but I would rather not. I'll give you the reason why is because we want to make it affordable and accessible for anybody in the world. I can
right.
tell you in the US, based on their current market dynamics, we are looking at an average sell price of approximately 8,000 to clinics. The Canadian market would be different. The Indian market would be different. The volumes will play a big factor, which would add economies of scale. We may be able to reduce the price because if the volumes are larger, the cost will also reduce to produce the device. So
Yeah.
that is the estimated price right now for the US market alone. The other markets would be different.
I want to talk a little bit about the rental, lease, and all of those options.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Very good idea. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So basically, again, let's say 8,000 or 5,000 or 3,000, that could still be a capital outlay for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we don't want that to be a hindrance for somebody to use the device. So instead, we have an option for leasing the device for approximately $200 to $250.
Right.
Or you could even, finance the device through third-party financing leasing companies. So both
Yeah.
options are there. Then lastly, there is a hardware as a service model, which basically means if there is an institution that has a good volume of stroke patients or clinicians, we could charge no fee for the device itself, but just a user fee on a per month basis, per user per month fee, which is hardware as a service that makes it absolutely affordable.
This
So
is fantastic. You spoke about a lot of cutting edge things because in India, the Narayana Health Foundation, they do the all of this like capital equipment. There's also Sri Shankara Cancer Foundation. It's $1 million machine. They have different ways of financing,
yeah,
renting, and
yeah,
Narayana Health they lease. That was Harvard Business Review case study. How he built such a low cost cardiac care factory all over India, not just one, like hundreds of them. So this is a tried and tested model, and I really like it. Financing and leasing and renting and hardware as a service. Such a cutting edge term. I didn't hear it before. So great, you've got all the things going well for you. Vineet and Samir, you've got McGill and Purdue, and you've got your deep technology experience, academia and industry coming together, novel business models, novel go to market strategies. So I wish you all the very best. And whoever is watching this, whether you're a clinical partner, a clinical advocate from the stroke, a group, or you're an investor who is itching to fund social impact startups in the medtech space, please reach out to Vineet and Samir. Vineet and Samir, what is the shortest, easiest way for the audience to get in touch with you?
The easiest way is to go to Vineet at iregained.ca or Samir at iregained.ca, or they can get on our website. It's iregained.rehab or iregained.ca. And very, very excited to talk to anybody who's interested in the product, in the investment venture. And thank you so much, Vida, for giving us this amazing opportunity to share our story with you.
Likewise. And Samir, any parting thoughts?
just help us make this a reality.
Of course we will. Of course we will. With people like you leading the way, certainly these things are bound to happen. Thank you so much for this amazing session, and we'll certainly have you back once again. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you,
day.
Vida.
Yeah.
Have a good day. Bye.